Hannah.
I'm Luanda Yasmin.
And I'm Anissa. Welcome to episode 30 of Ethnically Speaking, the show where we discuss everything and anything affecting the UK's highly melanated communities, from current affairs to pop culture and everything in between. We always keep it 100, and this week we're talking about the New Year's honour list, the time we spend investing in picking a partner, Netflix's new series Bridgerton, and a controversial comedy. So Sophie, what do you have for us?
Well, the New Year's Honours List recognises achievements and service by extraordinary members of the British public, and it appoints them to the Order of the British Empire. Now, this year's list features Lewis Hamilton, Craig David. In fact, it is the most diverse list in history, with 14.2% of people coming from a BAME background. But the list still remains controversial because of the inclusion of the word empire, which has connotational links to colonialization and slavery. I want to know, do you think if they take out the word empire that the award would be less controversial? And should Black and marginalised communities refuse the honour because of its links to the past?
Well, personally, I appreciate people who are open and honest about why they reject the award. But I'm also not here to turn my nose up at people who accept it. I think obviously, there's the issue with the word empire because of what it represents. Like, the empire was built on colonialism and white supremacy. That is the price of the empire. And that's why people feel that they can't accept the award. But I'm not going to reserve my judgment for Black and brown people. I think that everyone's comfortability with the terminology should be questioned. Like, why would we put a microscope on Black and brown people and not everyone who is offered the awards? Why are we not having a conversation with everyone about why we're comfortable with the use of the term empire? So, there was a woman called Gina Martin, who is a white woman, and she was partly responsible for the criminalization of upskirting. So she's a G. But she said that she refused the award because she felt that it would have been deeply hypocritical of her to accept an award like that while still being committed to anti-racism. So yeah, I'm here for the word being changed. I mean, I saw something that said that people were proposing they change it to Order of British Excellence. I don't know why they didn't do that.
I think because excellence is already in the title. Before you get to OBE, it's something like the blah, blah, blah of excellence. And so you couldn't put excellence twice in one sentence.
Well, let's
I can't remember what the official sentence was.
Are you sure excellence is in there? Is it not the Order of the British Empire? Is that not?
No, before you say the Order of British Empire, when they give it to you, they like the sentence that they decree you with starts with excellence in it. Okay, I can't remember the sentence off my head. So then, sorry, because I was watching the interview and then the person was like, "Can't we just change to excellence?" They were like, "No, excellence is already in there," and so it was like a bit of a thing.
I think that's an excuse, because if you have OBE and MBE, it's like Order of British Empire, Member of British Empire. That's what the award you're giving me stands for. So actually, you could change it to Order of British Excellence and then just say something else when you're complimenting me when you're handing it over. Like, that's a cop-out, I think.
I neither agree nor disagree. I don't know. But for me, if they take the word empire out, I don't know if it makes a massive difference for me, because it's still the same award. It's just got a different title. And I think a lot of the people that I heard, the reasons why they rejected it, obviously there was the word empire and the things that it is attached to and what all the connotations. But a lot of them were just saying how you said about how hypocritical it was. And I was listening to Phil Scraton, I forget his name. I don't know if you guys know him. He does like social justice and does criminology and that kind of thing. Anyway, he's a white guy, but he basically said he refused his because the work that he does is uncovering the truth. And he basically felt like the British Empire was riddled with a lot of untruths. So it would be hypocritical for him to take that and like a slap in the face about the work that he has. So I think for a lot of people, even if you change the word, it's still the same award and they still wouldn't want to receive it. But like yourself, Luanda, I don't criticize anybody who's black or brown and wants to receive that award, because they may be receiving the award because they're maybe changing what the meaning is, or they're proud of their hard work. When I was reading about Miss Dynamite, who accepted her award, she was saying that the reason why she accepted hers was she was recognizing everything her ancestors done with Windrush and slavery, and so that was why she accepted her award. And when I heard that, I went, fair enough. You have to do what feels right for you. And I think for Black and brown people, you just have to decide whether it is hypocritical for you to take it or not, and what it means to you.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'm not even sure if it's actually the word empire that actually causes the problem. I think it's the point that we haven't reckoned with empire and what it did, that we're not willing to atone for it. We don't want to mention it. We don't want to say that we controlled the world and we did that through slavery, and that's the reason why people here. I think it's all these other things, because we're happy to talk about the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire. We'll talk about these things, but I think British Empire is so loaded because we still refuse to talk about how this country was built on the backs of the less fortunate wherever they were in the world, because it covered the majority of the known world at the time. And I think I so much agree with Luanda when she was saying about why we're focusing on Black and brown people, because I didn't even think of that. I thought more so about a Guardian article, and they were like, oh, we're really surprised that Lewis Hamilton's going to accept his knighthood because he stood for Black Lives Matters. And I'm like, why does critiquing the country you come from mean that you can't share in the achievements, or you say, like, I'm still proud to be British, but I just think there's some areas where they clearly need to fix themselves up. I just hate that it has to be in opposition to each other in terms of, well, if you're going to accept it, then you're fine with everything Britain did. And I just don't think it works like that.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't for me anyway.
Yeah. No, I think so as well. And also because in terms of, we've always spoken about all the time, the systematic injustices for Black and brown people. It's like, if you're being recognised with this award, who knows how hard you've had to work just to even be on a list like that. So I just feel like I'm not going to dictate to other people when they can or can't feel like they should accept something as an acknowledgement for the work that they've done. Like I said before, like, I respect everyone who's given it back and said, I've given it back because A, B, and C, but I'm also not going to judge people who feel like, actually, I want to accept it and I feel like I have a right to.
Definitely. And just to pick on what Sophie said, I was actually watching I guess it was like a mini debate it was on Good Morning Britain when they were talking about this. And this was actually, I believe it was either last year or a couple years ago. So this isn't like a new thing about whether the word empire should be taken out. And obviously you've got Piers Morgan and a few other fancy favourites. And when they had like a specialist in, and I can't remember his last name, but his name was Toby. And he was really trying to argue why, like, all the great things that the British Empire did. And he was arguing this to like these two black gentlemen, and I think one was like an activist and one's like a hip-hop artist or something, and then they were both saying basically the British Empire has done horrific things. And then Toby was like, oh, what about all the good things the Empire did? We gave you education and infrastructure. And one of the guys, Kehinde, was like, yeah, you gave us infrastructure so you could take all the products that you were stealing from us out of the country. Like, stop telling it us as a favour and stop telling us it's a good thing and accept that you guys did wrong. And I think they were going back and forth. I actually had to stop watching it because it was just too much for me. But there is this denial about what they did. And basically, Toby then went to basically say that what they did, the British Empire did, wasn't as bad as what the Nazis did. And it was just like, there's no need for that comparison. But literally, in fact, maybe it is hand on hand. But it's that people don't want to accept maybe what the Empire had done. And I think that is still running very rampant through current British society.
And I think as well, like, the Empire is over. And I think that's the bit that really I don't seem to get with why people or the government are so staunch about holding on to it. Like, the empire doesn't exist. Like, literally, it's gone. But we still want to keep it in the name. And then when we have discussions about should we get rid of it in the title because of the connotations, people are just like, no, we're going to keep it, because I think we like to still think that we're Great Britain, that we are the Britain of the British Empire. And we don't. It's just all these ties to this that we just don't want to let go of. And I think in the face of what's going on in the world with Brexit, of having left the EU, not really knowing what the hell that deal says, no matter how many times Boris wants to wave it in people's faces, we are not the empire that we were. So holding on to the name to make people feel like they're part of something special, I just think it's so ludicrous.
I mean, I was gonna say the same thing because Anissa, you just mentioned Kehinde, and he was the one that reminded me. Like, he literally said Kehinde Andrews was like, why are we still talking about the empire when it doesn't exist anymore? So that kind of made me think, oh yeah, why are we? And so it feels as though if everyone's saying we recognize all of these negative things that have happened to marginalized people because of the empire, like the only reason why the empire exists is because, like Sophie says, it was built off the backs of the less fortunate who don't get to reap the rewards, not even in the present day. It's like, if everyone's saying this, and not only black and brown people are denying the awards, but also white people who want to live in a progressive world, it's like, what exactly is it that you're clinging onto so hard that you just won't let go of? Because we're not saying don't recognize British excellence. We're not saying don't reward people for their hard work. We're just saying, why does it have to be attached to a legacy that is racist and colonialist?
I think it's because it brought power and money. Like, that's the reason why we still want to be linked to it, because the empire was something impressive from that perspective. In terms of how much of the world it covered, in terms of how much wealth it brought to a very small island, if we're being very honest. So I think that's what it is for them. But
yeah, I was going to say that I think it's also like the whole, like, I don't want to call it like a fantasy, but the way they've idealized it, it's kind of like when we're thinking empire, they're not even thinking about the horrific things that happen. It's just a part of that thing of, like, when people question, why do we still have a royal family? Why do we still have a monarchy? It's a part of being British for them. It's this idealistic version of Britain, and we're called Great Britain, and we still have a queen, and the queen gives honours, and they still knight people. It's literally it's just holding on to that, the ideal. And I guess if I was romanticizing Britain and everything, of course I'd be like, oh, okay, cool, I'd love to get an award from the Queen. And because you romanticize that version of Britain, but then when you get into the real world and understand what the British Empire did, that's where it becomes more complicated. But I think for a lot of people, they're holding on to it because they still are romanticizing that version of Britain for them.
I just wonder if everyone really links it to that idea of empire when they get the award, because when I first was thinking about this, I was just like, I'd accept the award because, as Wanda said, it's a recognition in an achievement of something great that I have done as a member, as a British public member or whatever, member of the British public, that's what I mean. And I would be like, I would be proud to accept it. And I'm like, would I automatically link it to empire and slavery and colonialization? I probably wouldn't. But I don't know. I think it really depends on the person, because there's Benjamin Zephaniah, the poet, who turned it down, and he was very forceful in the reasons why he turned it down. Like, he was like, it reminds me of my ancestors who were taken, of the mothers who were raped, and all of this. So for some people, it does stir up very, very strong feelings, but it really depends on, I guess, where you stand. And I think we've all said this, like, it has to come down to a personal decision. But I think the government is not going to be long in trying to avoid this question. It's going to keep coming up again and again and again and again. And they're going to have to come up with better answers than they have already.
Does the Queen have another award that she gives out that just doesn't have this empire stink to it? It doesn't have this empire stink to it. Does she have, like, my top 20 favourite people of the year or something? Because honestly, I think, no, I'm being honest, I think a lot of people also like just say that they've been recognised by the Queen. Sometimes they probably don't even care about the actual award itself. It's just that they've been recognised by the Queen.
Because, there was someone who was trying to give their award back, and they said, I don't even know who to send this to. They don't actually know where this comes from. And this is, and this is not specifically.
I thought they had a ceremony. I'm
thinking of, like, knighthood.
Maybe that's
because this is just a New Year's honours list, and it's not necessarily saying, like, how every year Obama's like, my favourite songs and my favourite films on this year. It's not the same as the Queen being like, yeah, I watched Lewis Hamilton race. It's like
the Queen actually gives them out. So usually it's
the member of the royal.
Yeah, it's the member of the royal family who gives it out.
But who shakes the hand?
Yes, so it will be the Queen.
Who shakes the hand, Sophie? But I'm saying, who made the list?
Oh, so you don't believe the Queen made the actual list?
I don't think they've ever even said that she has. I don't
No,
think
but I'm just asking.
Do you know what I mean? They haven't said this comes directly from Her Majesty the Queen. This is just an honour from the British Empire. And like you might have Princess Anne or Queen Elizabeth or someone shaking the hand to say well done. But I've seen Queen Elizabeth shake Miley Cyrus's hand. Have you been listening to Party in the USA? I don't think so.
No, the Queen. Okay, so it is actually the Queen's honours list. So whether the Queen does it specifically herself or not, I know the government does have a hand in it, but the Queen gives out honours twice a year. She gives it out at the beginning of the year, and she also gives it out on her birthday. And the past behind it as well is that the Queen used to give out titles. So it's come down from that. So before, for people who had done great things in the country, they would give out a title or a dukedom or a piece of land, money.
Or a lord or lady.
They don't do that anymore. Yeah, exactly. They would give those
out.
I'd
love to be a lady.
That sort of thing isn't given out anymore. They've replaced it with the Queen giving out the awards and honours. The government does have a part in it, and I think that's why some people are now saying that they feel like it's been diminished because the government seems to give it out for public favours. But it is the Queen that has a part in it because it is specifically the Queen's honours list that she releases every new year.
Oh, I was just going to say, to bring it back to the first point, I'm just saying, instead of having, like, maybe these awards that have the Empire stink on it, maybe this should just be a different type of award, maybe not so focused on the British Empire, but kind of like, maybe who the Queen likes. I'm not going to lie, if the Queen gave me an award and made me a lady and gave me some land, I'm going to take it. Do I want one of the BEs? I'm not sure. I don't think so. It doesn't come with the land and the title. But hell yeah, would I take the lady in the title? I'm telling you that for free.
But that's the thing that I'm saying. Like, I think most people, if you ask them, probably link it to the Queen because, you know, it's when you see like David Beckham going and he's in his morning suit and all the people are dressed up to go and receive it. I think that's more what people linked it to than specifically because how many people even know what OBE art stands for if you went and stopped them in the street? Like, I would guess most people don't even know.
I'm sure they'll know if they're being offered it.
Sorry, say
like
that again?
You're saying the average person, yeah, but if you're specifically being offered the award, like, you'll know what it means because they'll tell you.
I mean the person, but I'm saying in terms of the debate that society's having about this and whether the name should be stripped from it, for the elite list of people who get it every year, yes, they'll know, but the majority of the public, which is millions more, they wouldn't even know. So that's why I'm saying, I think it's a complicated issue. Yeah, I think people think of it more as an honour from the Queen rather than linking it to the name. That's what in my personal opinion.
Same. I really want the land now, honestly, so I can't stop thinking about it. It's crazy. I really want to be called Lady Anissa. You have no idea.
They don't give it out anymore.
I want to be called Lady Anissa.
I support this dream.
So I wanted to talk to you ladies about something else that happened this year, and it was Twitter user @TomScranito who responded to one broken-hearted woman's request to hear happy stories about people who had found love in their 30s. And he said, I got divorced at 34. Immediately, I went onto OkCupid, and over the course of 2 years, I messaged 500 plus first messages. I went on 100 plus first dates, and then I met the love of my life. I've now been married for 3 years, and I have a 2-year-old, and he's extremely cute. But he also went on to say, why does it seem that we seem to put more effort into where we work 40 hours a week rather than the person who we spend the rest of that week with? So I want to know, should we approach finding love as we would approach finding the great or perfect job?
You see, I saw this thread on Twitter, and first of all, I want to say to Big Tommy, well done, because that perseverance was incredible.
Yo,
like 100 plus first dates.
That was
real. He went in, and I honestly, I really commend him for that. It's an interesting point that he brings up, because I do think, especially when we're trying to find our dream job, like we put so much effort and hours into it. However, I don't know if I'd compare finding a partner to finding a job. That's just my personal preference. I personally wouldn't. But I don't know. I think people still romanticize love. Like, you feel like you're just going to find the one. So you don't have to, make a CV and knock on doors to give it out to find love. You just feel like you're just going to find it. I do think, though, because of the times that we're in right now with coronavirus and tier 4 and lockdown every minute, it's really difficult to find the person that you want because you're not being out and you're not getting to be social. So in this scenario, if I was older and I was looking for someone that I wanted to spend my time with, then yeah, I'd put the same effort as I would looking for a job as I would looking for a man. I'd be on every single dating app. I'd be doing professional photo shoots in the house. I would be doing FaceTime till I couldn't time the face anymore, because I would put all that effort in to find the one, because I wouldn't be able to be out and be social. But as I said, again, it depends. I wouldn't compare it to a job, because I don't know, like sometimes when you're looking for a job, you're just kind of looking for who's going to pay you the most money. And I guess you could compare that to a partner, but then it just gets a bit wild at that point. So I just think anybody who wants to find a partner, you should be particular in picking a partner. And maybe Tom has a point in that we have to be as vigilant when we're looking for a job, when we're looking for a partner. And maybe that's why so many relationships wouldn't work. Sorry, I'm still thinking on this. Sorry, go.
It's fine. I think people should maybe change their mindset a little bit in terms of dating, because I think people, whenever they're looking for someone to be in a relationship with, they're kind of just thinking of the end goal. Like, I want to marry this person and this is the end. That's my life partner at the end. But not to have like a morbid look on marriage, but like 42% of marriages in the UK end in divorce anyway. So it's like, even if your end goal is marriage, it might not always be the end. But I think the reason why he brought up the job is a little bit interesting, because when you're doing the work, like you said, and he said, yeah, maybe you might want the one that has the most money. But I don't know about you guys, but every job that I've had, I've tried to enjoy the job, even if it's not relevant to the career path that I'm taking. I'm going to enjoy my time here because I have to be here, like he said, lots of hours of the week. So I think people always have this attitude towards relationships, like when they were in a relationship and it ends, they're like, oh, I've just wasted 2 years on this person. But you didn't waste 2 years, because you were being loved and you were giving love for those 2 years, and you've probably learned so much to take into your next relationship, just like how, there's new jobs that we can now handle because of the ones that we've had before. So it's kind of just like, people should maybe be a little bit more relaxed and open when it comes to it, instead of just being like, I need this partner at the end. Because when you have that type of perspective, I feel like I see this all the time, and I talk about it all the time, but I really see a lot of good people settling for things that are below their worth, just because they believe that they need to be in a relationship, and they can't stand the idea of not having kids by a certain age or being married by a certain age. And so they're accepting less than they would if they were more relaxed on the quest. You know what I mean?
So you wouldn't try as hard as Tom, Luanda? I'm just a general question.
Oh,
would you put in that kind of effort?
I love first dates, so I would 100% be happy to go on 100 first dates in 2 years. Honestly, I like first dates are the best, so I don't have any issue with that. And I just think everyone's kind of journey is different. So I think for him, he was like, it's a numbers game, do the numbers, which is fine. And I asked my friend this one time, how did you meet? And he was like, it's a numbers game. I was just sending out friends requests and stuff. And just see what landed. But it works. You know what I mean? Like, people find each other. But I guess my point was that people put too much pressure on it instead of just enjoying the journey.
I don't know, I guess I'm somewhere in the middle of both of you, because something that you said, Anissa, which I thought, I definitely feel that way. Because you were saying, like, based on age, and I think it really depends on age, depending on how hard or how far you're going to make it look like a quest for a job, like a great job. Because if you're in it, like, let me speak for myself. When I was in my 20s, I didn't really fuss about finding someone. Like, it always just happened. I always kind of met someone. There was always a guy who was attracted to me and wanted to chat, and had some boyfriends and all of that.
Yes, Sophie.
What? Like,
tell her she's getting back from day. Yes.
A girl like me don't stay single for long.
Do you know what? I stayed single. I stayed single a lot, I would say, in terms of being in an official relationship. But I never struggled with having guys being attracted and wanting to chat to me. It's like never getting to the final point. Like, you chat to them for a bit and you're like, there's no future in this. That's more what it was like for me. But I remember worrying about it as I got older, because I was one of those people like, oh my days, like I had this idea in my head when I was going to get married. And, you know, if I want to have children, I got to think about that. And then I kind of calmed down and it really just happened naturally, but it still happened before I turned 30. If I think about my friends who have turned 30 plus and still haven't found somebody who they want to spend their life with, for them, it much more is a numbers game if they're online dating. And I think Tom, when he's talking about online dating, 100% it's a numbers game. Like, it's not like going out to various bars and restaurants and seeing someone you like. You're literally having to hedge your bets. Don't get too caught up on anybody until like you find some, go on a couple of dates, like, okay, this is someone worth investing time in, because there's so much out there. You have to really like sift through it, I guess, like you would to a certain extent a job. So for me, I think it probably depends on age from what I've seen from probably some of the friends that I have, but I think it's different for everybody. I guess it's how long you want to wait for to think that maybe it's going to like fall into your lap. And I think what you said, Anissa, about COVID definitely plays a part now, because who knows when people are going to be able to go out and socialize and meet people organically.
I definitely agree that age plays a part, not from my own experience, but I'm sure my older sister doesn't mind me telling
You're
this
still
story.
in the sweet spot, girl. You're still in the sweet spot. That's all right.
But this story does involve me, but it is my older sister's story. But we were laughing about this the other week, so she'll be fine. Obviously, she had crossed the 30 line, and me and my twin sister were wildly concerned that she wouldn't have anyone to spend her time with. And yes, she was going out bars and meeting people, but we were like, no, she needs to work harder. She wants to find the right one. So we said, you know what we're going to do, girl? We're going to put you on a dating site. This is what we were like. We were like, yes. So we were trying to figure out what dating site felt like you could get the most serious partner. But then we thought, what is the number one things she should want in a man? And the first one we thought was, he needs a job. So anyway, we typed in basically dating app people with jobs, and we found this dating website called Working Professionals. And we were like, oh, fabulous. Everyone here should have a job. Anyway, long story short, we put her a profile and we got her all set up. Then we called her to let her know that we had done this. And she was not happy, but it was okay. And then it started pinging off, like ping, 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 ping. Like it was just pinging. And we were like, girl, this is it. You need to talk to this one and that one and this one. And she started chatting to them for the first day, but then she couldn't. She said it was just overwhelming, the amount of people that were reaching out, and she had to reach out. So she just basically was like, I'm not doing this. And she came off of it a day later. But we were just so convinced, because she was over a certain age, and because obviously she was going out and being social, because she hadn't met anyone yet, we were like, no, we need to step in and really like push the needle on this. But you know, she rebuked our help and she went out and found a lovely partner socially in her own time. And so I think age does definitely play a part. And me, who is not that age yet but really was feeling for my sister, I really tried, and I've decided to let go. No matter what age you are, if you don't feel like you need to put in that much effort, then, you know, do you, boo. That's all.
Anissa, do you have like an idea in your head of like an age? Do you want to get married?
Okay, yeah.
Do you have an age in your head that you would like be like, okay, by this age I'm married, kind of thing? Or
No, I don't. No, I don't. The thing is, I'm more certain that I want to get married versus having kids, but I don't have an age where I'm like, I have to be married by, or if I don't get married in my life, I'll be upset. Like, I'm not like that. I'm not attached to it like that.
Fair.
But I was attached to it like that for my sister. I just
yeah, because she wanted it, so it's different. It's not what she wanted.
But the thing is, my older sister didn't even want it, but we just wanted it for her. It was
I think you're making an important point there, Anissa, just like how much pressure there is, especially for women, to find someone before they're 30. Because I think when I originally saw this story, I actually felt quite sad for the woman who put the message out on Twitter. Because I was just like, for her to feel like that's it for me now. I'm in my 30s. I'm never going to meet anybody. And I think that we have such a preoccupation with youth, and especially in the 20s. Like, that seems to be in society the peak age of anything. Like, so a lot of the people who we see on TV, the people who we promote are usually in their 20s, or actors or go into their 30s. And then Meryl Streep said, when she got to the age of 40, she literally started getting all these witch roles sent to her via her agent, literally at the age of 40. So I think there is a preoccupation there of thinking that, 30 is too old. And I don't think it is at all. Like, now I'm in my 30s, so maybe I'm a bit biased, but I think more so for people in their 30s, and again, I'll say women because I am a woman. If you do want to have children and you want to have children biologically, you want to have children yourself, you don't want to adopt, then there probably is more of a ticking time as to finding a partner, even though there are other options. But also for some of my friends, it's not so much that they're desperate to find a man. Some of them are extremely successful, have done very, very well for themselves, live by themselves, and they want someone to share their life with now. And they're like, actually, I've done all this stuff by myself. I want to share my life with somebody. I want to have companionship. I want to experience life. I want to travel with somebody. And I think that they now are feeling that gap for them, that a friendship with maybe one of their female friends or even one of their male friends can't really feel, which I understand. So I think there's various reasons why people might go at it really, really hard. But one thing I want to say is, when I don't want to talk too long, is that even as much as we're saying, that much work to get into a relationship, sometimes when in a relationship, you are going to have to work that hard sometimes, like it's a job. Like,
even
it's
harder,
not always going to be.
Over time.
People stay married for like
they ain't
30,
paying you double
40
for
years,
it.
10 years. Yeah, they're not just going through their marriage or their relationship, just it's easy sailing, we never worry about anything. No, they have to work at it. So at some point, you're going to have to work at your relationship. So don't be put off if you have to work at the beginning.
That's an interesting perspective. No, honestly, I've never thought of it that way. It's like, because you do have to work in your relationship, so why wouldn't you work at the beginning? Like, that has actually challenged my thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually have a story about it, because like when I was dating Jonathan, my husband, oh gosh, he was he was like the first long-term relationship that I'd been in. So like I said, I dated a few guys in my 20s, but never really had a long-term relationship. And because I had always dated guys and everything was perfect, honeymoon period, and then it just kind of ended or something happened, I never really got past the long, extensive honeymoon period to have to the point where you have to now push through more difficult things. And I remember Jonathan sat me down one time and was just like, you really need to put in more effort because you're not putting in enough effort. And I'm just like, well, if I have to put in that much effort, maybe it's a sign that we shouldn't be together. And he was just like, call your mum. Call your mum and ask her, yeah? So I called my mum and I asked her, and she was just like, you have to put in effort all the time. Like, and not because it's hard all the time, but you should always be trying your best to make the most of your relationship. And some days are easier than others, and some days you're trying and it's a breeze in the park. And then those rare times, which I'm very fortunate, you have to try and things are difficult. But she was like, you should be trying all the time. You can't just be like, things are going to coast. So that really taught me that in order to get the best out of my relationship, I have to do the best. And I don't think that's different for any relationship. Like in my friendships, I can't coast and never call my friends or be invested in their lives or remember their birthdays and all this stuff and expect we're going to have this really intimate, vulnerable friendship with somebody. It doesn't happen. So we're sold a lie on what relationships should be. So for me, put in the work, you're going to reap the results.
Yeah. I think the friendship thing that you mentioned is actually quite relevant, because I think a lot of the time we accept things from romantic partners that we wouldn't accept from our friends. And so for me, like, the basis of every good relationship is a friendship, and you mix that in with romance, and that's when you get a great relationship. But sometimes people hold their friends to a higher standard than they do the people that they're dating, and I don't think we should.
And to be honest, Luanda, I think that's one of the issues with people, what you were saying earlier about people who settle for less, because some people are willing, like you said, to settle for things in a relationship that they wouldn't in a great job. They were like, my job is treating me like crap. It's time to move on. Sending out those CVs. I deserve better. But in a relationship, you're just like, maybe if I just get over it. It's like, no, my friend, recognize the red flags. You would in your job. Sometimes it's just time to move on.
True. And on the note of moving on, that brings us to the halfway mark of the episode. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. So far, we have talked about the controversial use of the word empire in the New Year's Honours List, and we have talked about whether it's a good idea to treat finding love like finding a job. And whilst we're on the topic of finding love, I want to talk about the new Netflix series Bridgerton. Set in Regency-era London, the series follows debutantes from noble families on their quest to find someone to marry. The show is less concerned with historical accuracy and more concerned with being inclusive, but people have still noticed that there is a lack of dark-skinned characters. Should we be happy that a historical Netflix drama which is popular is including highly melanated people at all? Or does the Bridgerton casting simply highlight colorism issues in television?
Okay, so do I think we should be happy? In short, no. Do I think it highlights issues of colorism? In short, not sure. Okay, first of all, I'm going to be coming from an opinion that may be slightly biased or out of context because I haven't watched Bridgerton or seen Bridgerton, and am I saying it right? Bridgerton?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bridgerton.
Yeah, I haven't seen the show. I will not see the show. So I'm only going over things that I have read and other people have spoken to me about, and threads and think pieces I've seen on Twitter and understood, just kind of get my background on the show. So do I think we should be happy? I hate the idea of we should be happy whenever we see like a black person or something. It's almost like we threw you a bone, like they get like I hate that wording. So for me, no, I don't think we should be happy. Do I think it highlights issues of colorism? I find that tough to say because, as I said, I've not watched the show, so I can't really speak to it. But what in my mind, it's that it feels to me that Hollywood is just doing what they usually do, like putting the black people in either stereotypical, like giving us stereotypical character traits, or their version of black is someone who was lighter skinned with looser curled hairs and things like that. So for me, it's not that it's highlighting it because we already know what's going on, and I don't know if I think, because for me it's a part of a bigger problem. It doesn't just sit with colorism. I feel like colorism is a part, but I feel like colorism is the umbrella in the rainstorm that is racism. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it's a part of it, but there's a lot of other umbrellas up in this rainstorm as to what I think is going on in Bridgerton. I am happy, obviously, to always see black people on screen, on film, acting their butts off and doing a good job. Obviously, I have not seen it, so it's a metaphorical happiness. But I can't personally say that I think it highlights colorism, but I definitely think it reinforces Hollywood's idea of black.
Why aren't you going to watch it?
I'm not the target audience. Sorry, no.
Who's the target audience?
The target audience could be absolutely anyone, but just
you're not a period drama person, basically.
No, well, yes and no. I'm not particularly a period drama person, and I'm also not. How do I say this? Shonda Rhimes' writing or her shows, her programming, I am not the target audience for. That is in short.
Okay, is it because of the way it kind of are you talking from like a scandal and how to get away with murder perspective?
And many other things.
Okay, sorry, I'm just very interested in that.
Do you know
Maybe I'm asking too many questions.
No, it's not too many questions, because the thing is, I think Shonda's doing her thing. I recently just watched How to Get Away with Murder. I previously watched Scandal, but then had to let it go. Anyway, I've recently taken it back up, and now I've had to take another break. But I do really like Shonda. I've even read her book, but I even had to stop reading the book. I've just realised I'm not engaged by her writing style, and that is what I will leave it at.
Girl, you know I'm going to have so many questions for you when we stop filming. But
so that is
that one alone. In terms of Bridgerton, I don't want to say that I was happy by the representation. I was glad about it, not because I'm like, oh, there's black people, but I think the Regency era is an era that we have predominantly not really seen any black people in. Like, one of the big things is Downton Abbey. That's something that has been named several times. And I think it's Julian Fellows who was the creator of that. And he was saying, well, you know, he's not going to lie because there just weren't black people around then, so he can't feature them, which is a lie. black people have been in this country since the Roman period, like since 12th, 13th century, but he just chose never to feature them apart from some random black guy who was a musician, and that was very stereotypical. So I can see that Bridgerton is trying to be a bit more inclusive, because they said that they're not doing color blind casting, they did color conscious casting because they consciously tried to include black people. Now, I definitely think they failed in the representation, I'm not gonna lie, because it wasn't even that they were stereotypically black or stereotypical characters. It was just more so there wasn't anything that really made them black. But it made me wonder, does everything need to feature characteristics of someone's black identity when there is a black character? I don't know the answer to that, but I just think Bridgerton has a really long way to go. And I think it's probably going to get there because it's been such a hit. But I just think that it needs to have better representation. We don't just want black people featured. We want to have them, have characteristics or say something or be something more than just a character that could be anybody.
So, sorry, just not to jump in. Are you just saying that, because I'm just trying to understand, that you would want the characters, because I'm presuming the characters are just being the characters, but they're not speaking about their blackness. Do you want the blackness to be a bit more overt? Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to understand.
Do you know what? That's a question I throw it to you ladies, because I don't actually know where I stand on that at the moment. That was one of the criticisms that I saw, and I was just like, well, do we want them to feature it? Because a lot of times when we talk about it in recent years, it's traumatic black experiences. Not so much joyful or just someone being black and happen to be in the Regency era. So I'm not really sure where I stand on that at the moment. They did make one vague reference to blackness in the entire series because I binge watched it over the New Year's. But I just thinking, for me, I didn't think it was a very good series in general. I think people are kind of excited and it's mediocre. But I think I'm happy that in an era where we're not usually represented, that they have tried to, at least.
Guys, I have so much to say.
I bet you do.
When everyone was talking, I was trying to be like, oh, I'll start there. You guys have just said so many things. Let me just start at the end, because I kind of feel the opposite way in terms of representation, because like Sophie, you just said that there wasn't anything that really like quote unquote made them black, but I don't feel like that always necessarily has to be the case. When, we talked about this one time when we were talking about Halle Berry almost taking the role of a trans man and then changing her mind after people said, maybe not babes. And we had that big conversation about representation in the media. And I feel like usually my biggest issues of representation is, let me just speak from a black perspective, because I could say all people of colour, but let me just speak from being black. It's like, you don't ever get to see characters. Actually, I'm not. It's relevant for all marginalised people. You don't actually get to see characters who are dealing with things other than what the thing is that makes them marginalised. So when you see black characters, they're usually dealing with racism. When you see characters with big bodies, they're usually dealing with their weight. They don't just get to be a person looking for love, or a person in a random series that doesn't really have anything to do with their race or their appearance or whatever it is that makes them marginalized. And I feel like that is the thing that aids humanization of marginalized communities, is to show that it's literally not just, we said this in episode 1, it's literally not just one sad road of racism and, all of the bad stuff that we talk about, which is fine to talk about, but I mean, like, it's not our everyday lives. Like, people are human. We do all the human things that everyone else does. But when we turn on the television, the representation doesn't look like that. So I actually appreciated the fact that these characters, they hardly changed. I can't say that because I haven't read the books. They hardly changed anything about the characters from book to screen apart from their appearance. And like Sophie said, there was a vague reference, but I didn't feel like I needed something else. I didn't feel like it needed to be like, oh, woe is me because I'm a black man and it's 1813. Like, I didn't need that. Like, we're here for a fantasy show. We're here for a fantasy show about romance. Why can't we just be having that? Why can't we just be having balls and someone playing the violin version of Thank You Next? Like, I don't need people to be struggling every single time we turn on the television. It's nice to have representation that is a lot more humanizing than that.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I haven't I never actually said I made up my mind on it. So I said, I'm not really sure where I stand on it. And I think I'm saying that's where some of the arguments have come from. I think it was in the Huffington Post or Refinery 24, whatever. They were saying how their thing is like, some people said, why didn't they talk about being black? And like you said, Luanda, I'm like, I'm not really sure where I stand on all of that. Like, for me, I'm like, they couldn't. It's all kind of a mishmash for me, because even though you're saying it is fantasy, which of course most of it is, some of it is based on facts in terms of Queen Charlotte and Mad King George. So there were elements of that. And I think that's why some people have really kicked against it, because they're like, oh, well, some of it's historical. We should just be making, and I'm like, drop me on that. Because like you said, if you're going to feature Ariana Grande and you're not protesting, don't say anything about the people being black. It doesn't make sense. But I think in terms of like the colorism debate, I was uncomfortable that most of the main characters who were featured of black descent were mixed raced or looked mixed raced or were light skinned, and the darker skinned black people were literally the extras. And that's where I think that Bridgerton has a way to go. But I guess I kind of thought about it like a lot of Shonda Rhimes things, like Grey's Anatomy that became Private Practice, that became Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, Station 19. Like, you have to start somewhere. So I'm going to give Bridgerton a little bit of rope, hopefully not to hang themselves, and see if later series they use this as a jumping off point to feature a much more diverse cast. Like maybe one of the love interests can be Asian or like from a different part of the world and not just black. So hopefully we'll see more. This is the first one that she's done for Netflix, so I'm hopeful.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the colorism, that is something that I definitely noticed, and it kind of frustrated me as well, because it feels like not just with Shonda's things, but in general, like if we were to look towards dark-skinned successful actresses, they're usually over the age of 35. But when we're talking about the young wives or the desirable, debutantes and things like that, they're nearly almost always mixed race, light-skinned black. And so it still says something to do with desirability and femininity when I saw lots of opportunities for there to be dark-skinned black women, and they were either not dark-skinned black, they were either not black at all, or they were light-skinned black. And so if we're talking about a show which is trying to be intentionally inclusive, why is it that even when we're trying to be intentionally inclusive, there is still the lack of dark-skinned female representation? Because I don't really feel like there was a great character who was a dark-skinned black man, and then the main black character, he's like a biracial black man. So there was a good mixture, I'd say, for the men. But again, when it comes to the women, there's one dark-skinned black actress, and again, like I said, she's over the age of 35. She's a brilliant actress, and so is the Queen. But that's why I wanted to say, in terms of the difference between, you mentioned, Sophie, the difference between a colourblind casting and a colour-conscious casting, because they were inspired by the fact that many historians believe that Queen Charlotte had African heritage, and they used that as means to be inclusive with the show. And that's not to say that there weren't black and brown people in Regency era London, because there were, but obviously there wouldn't have been that many, and it wouldn't have been casual to have an interracial relationship. But I don't have a problem with the fact that they've made it seem like it would have been in 1813. That's fine, because I'm here for the representation. But like I said, again, it just always feels like no matter how inclusive we get, like dark-skinned black women, especially young ones, are always fallen by the wayside.
But that even to like, I 100% agree with you, Lavanda. And I know that we spoke about they were doing like a conscious casting, but I still feel like a lot of their unconscious biases still riddle their way through in the casting, because it's that idea of, or the notion that some people have had, that young, darker skinned women, whether you are black or Asian, whenever you're a darker tone and you're young, that we're not the objects of desire. We just are not seen that way. And I think that's what that probably may have played a part. I can't say for sure, but when they're casting someone and they're thinking, oh, who's going to be a lead designer, they might not think, oh, it's going to be I think it could be a bit of an unconscious bias there, even though they were trying to cast consciously.
I feel that, and I'm here for more South Asian representation in the show.
Oh, hell yeah. And the darker South Asian ones, please.
Darker South Asian?
Yes, please.
Because there were two South Asian people, I counted two South Asian people that had lines, and both of them, like, they could have been they weren't so like they would have been white passing, but they could have been maybe a biracial black person,
Very
maybe
fair.
a tanned white person. So I'm absolutely here to see like dark-skinned South Asian people be in the desirable, rich, high society roles as well. And they've got time. This woman has written a lot of books, so we have room for lots of series. I'm gonna give them space. There's room.
That's what I'm here for, giving it a bit of space, because it's actually like an 8-part book series, this specific series, because it's based on every child in the family finding someone. So we got like potentially 8 series if it carries on being this popular, which I'm sure it will. But I just wondered, do you think that we're just never pleased? Because that's something I had to ask myself, because when I saw some of the responses that people had, I'm like, guys, if there had been no black people, would have been complaining about that and just said, can't we get some black people? And then we get some black people and we're just like, we're not happy with those black people. Part of me was just like, let's just see where it goes. Like Shonda Rhimes, she's not the person who's not here for diversity. Like we can say a lot about her writing or whatever, but she started off Grey's Anatomy. The main character, they said apart from the main character, everyone else was a colorblind cast, and that was a colorblind casting. Whereas you see with Scandal, once she was able to make that a success, she was able to try and put more people in position. And I think very much because this is the first one, again, like I said, on Netflix, they're just kind of towing the line. And I'm sure that more of the stuff that she brings, because she has a multi-million pounds deal with them, she's going to do much more representation.
I feel like that what you just said, Sophie, just goes back into what Anissa started her statement with, because you're like, oh, well, we're never just going to be happy. And Anissa says, like, you know, I can like this or I can't like this. I shouldn't feel like I should be silenced just because you've essentially thrown us a bone. And for me, it's like, I'm pleased enough with the inclusivity for me to watch all of the episodes of this show, but it doesn't mean that we still can't talk about things that could be improved. And I don't see anything wrong with constructive criticism, because it's like, we're never going to learn if we don't do it that way. I think people being silent is the thing that holds us back from progressing to the point where everyone's included. So there's nothing wrong with having a conversation about, like, actually, I think it's great that they included all of these types of characters, because really they didn't have to. Like, I'm sure this woman, when she wrote the book, she wasn't thinking that the Duke was black, but she's happy for the Duke to be cast as a black man. So that's progression for me. But it's not a destination. It's more like a journey. So we can still talk about what it would look like for us to get to the next step.
You see, I'm a bit on the other side of the fence for that. I agreed what you said, Luanda, but I do think, and I'm not speaking for black people, I'm just talking people at a point, we've got to an age where everyone is super critical about everything, and they're not okay to just let art breathe. Do you know what I mean? Like, they have to have an opinion. They have to be upset about something. I call them the Moni Jonies or the Moody Trudies. Like, they just need to be upset about something. And even when I'm with you, nothing is ever perfect. So something can always improve and get better. But I usually feel like, and I don't know if it's just the way social media and things work, you usually just hear a lot of the negative before you hear the positive. And so for me, it's just like sometimes you just have to let things breathe a little bit. Does that make sense? I don't know if... Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense, girl. It makes sense.
So from dramedy to comedy, comedian Ricky Gervais has recently come under fire from his fellow comedian Frankie Boyle for using trans jokes in his set. Frankie Boyle has labelled them as lazy, and other comedians such as Dave Chappelle have also come under fire for making fun of marginalised people in their set. Does 21st century comedy need to be controversial to be funny? And should comedians always be politically correct with their gags? Or have we as a society lost the ability to take a joke?
I think this is an interesting one for me, because I think that comedians are known for being controversial, especially some of the best ones, like the ones who have been the most famous and I would say maybe top tier, quote unquote, but they have played fast and loose with that controversy line. Now, it's not always, in fact, it probably is always a joke at somebody. So I'm not talking specifically about Ricky Gervais and the kind of trans jokes he's making, but I'm just really saying that comedians are known for pushing the envelope. And I just wonder, what joke is not okay? Because I think that for me is the difficulty. Because if we're saying that we can't make jokes about trans people, I'm not saying that we should, let me make that very clear, but then we're not going to make race jokes. Is it then bad to make jokes about Donald Trump because he's a person and he could be offended and hurt? Frankie Boyle himself got into trouble about COVID jokes that he was making, and people saying, well, those weren't appropriate because people were dying. I think it's very difficult to find the line of controversy, because I think so many of comedians' jokes, it really is how people personally relate to them. So I think it is very difficult. And I think that I don't mind comedians being a bit controversial, but it depends about where those controversial jokes lie. I don't know where the yardstick should be, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. I do feel like it's a little bit of a blurred line, because like my understanding of the nature of comedy is to be, I don't want to say offensive, but you know, to kind of provoke something in people, whether it's laughter or like a, oh my gosh, like they're doing it to be salacious, like that's, you know, that's their job. I'm not particularly a fan of stand-up comedy. I do really like scripted comedy, like rom-coms, but stand-up comedy isn't my bag. Like I never find any of it funny, and I don't really like its style, because like it's kind of like what you said, Sophie, like there's never not a joke that doesn't offend anyone. Like, jokes are at the expense of someone. And so someone, somewhere, sometime are going to get offended. The issue is sometimes people have a luxury of the kind of offense they have, because if you're a marginalized group, then obviously people are always offending you. So it's kind of like, it's not that funny. You're kind of tired of it. But if you are a group that's more privileged, you might be like, oh yeah, I can laugh at myself, hee hee ha ha, because you have the luxury to kind of let it roll off your back. But it's a hard line, because I think comedy is meant to be offensive and offends people. Whether we should policing it is also difficult, because I kind of like, for me, and I'm not talking about the trans jokes, I'm just talking about comedy in general, it's somebody's form of expression and form of art, and I don't want to tell them what to do with their art, if that makes any sense. Like, I don't want to limit them, but then it becomes difficult if the art that you're making is hurting people. So, but then if the very nature of your art is to cause offense to people, so it feels like you just go on in a circle, like round and round. So with comedies, for me, it's kind of hard to put the needle on it. I do think if a group have spoken out and said, hey, your jokes have made me feel X, Y, Z, you should really take a look at the jokes that you're making. But then it also comes down to that particular individual. Like, I'm sure as Black females, we've heard a lot of jokes about Black people, and maybe some jokes we've laughed at, maybe some jokes we haven't found offensive. And I think that's when it comes down to the individual person of what offends them and what doesn't. Yeah, it's a blurred line from us. It's confusing.
So I think, I believe in freedom of speech, but what I've noticed when people get into trouble for something that they've said and they try to remind everyone of their rights to freedom of speech is that they're actually asking for their right to speak without any repercussions. And so if we're going to go off the whole, every human has a right to freedom of speech, that means every human has a right to respond to something that you've said, whether positively or negatively. And I think when it comes to comedy, I think the issue lies with people who have privilege making jokes about marginalized people. And it's like you're not including them in the joke, you're making them the punchline of the joke, whilst you stand on stage not having to deal with any of the things that makes them, get mistreated. And then on top of that, you're going to be like, oh, and then let's also laugh at these people. So I definitely understand why people are speaking out and saying this is lazy, because a lot of the time it is. And a lot of the time we use comedy as a cloak for things that are actually transphobic or homophobic or racist. Because I don't mind when I see like a Black comedian making jokes about racism, to take the weight off it. And so everyone can just have a night where they're laughing about a bad situation rather than a white person making a joke at a Black person's expense. And so I feel like you're just translating things that would have been, that is still problematic, whether you say it plainly or whether you try to say it in a stand-up comedy routine. But at the same time, like I said, I believe in freedom of speech. So I think comedians should make whatever set they want to make for the audience that they want to create it for. But they have to understand that not everyone is going to fall into the category of finding it funny. Not everyone is going to be your audience. So just accept that. If you want to make those kinds of jokes, there is someone who's still going to buy a ticket to that gig. but it's just not going to be everyone. And for the legends who've already had the height of their career, you can either like accept a smaller audience or move with the times. That's it.
Yeah, and to be honest, a lot of these comedians who they're talking about, like Ricky Gervais is not losing sleep over what Frankie Boyle says. Let's be honest. Dave Chappelle is probably not losing sleep about what people are saying about his jokes because, like, I don't agree with the trans jokes. Like, and I think it's very difficult because even when you're saying people making jokes about marginalized groups. So yes, if we want to rate a hierarchy of injustice or marginalization, black trans would probably come under black. But I think that's where we have the difficulty is when we start to rate people's marginalization and injustice. Well, like, because he's a black man, it's not appropriate for him to make jokes about black trans people because they're worse off. And I just feel very, very, I don't know where I stand on that because again, when we heard there was a certain influencer this year who was talking about a marginalized group and then people saying, well, she was like, well, I'm from a marginalized group and my group is more marginalized than your group. And it's just like, we need to move away from that. We need to start talking about justice for all groups, for all marginalized people. So that's where I have a difficulty. And something else that you said, Lawanda, that I think was really interesting because there was a female comedian who was from Asian descent. I think her name was Christina Wong. Her name was Christina Wong, and she makes jokes about people from Asian descent. And she talks about mental health and this and that because she says she's trying to bring light to the stigma that's attached to it. And then people from her community, she said, would contact her and said, stop doing that because it's making us look bad. But then she's from the community. So does she not get to make jokes about the community? Like, it's just such a tricky issue. And I think something that Anissa said earlier on also plays into it is that we are now a generation who takes up arms for everything. And in some instances it's good, but I think in sometimes it does go to the point where not stopping freedom of speech, but sometimes we're just not accepting to like really hear anything. If it causes anyone offense, then we should never hear it again. And I've said it before, I think that's going to take us to a dangerous place.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's really tough because like I think everyone is making like super valid points, and that's where it becomes so blurred because nobody wants anybody's feelings to be hurt at any joke, but this is the nature of their job, and so it just makes it so tough. There's certain jokes that I could tell you like for 100%. Absolutely not. Like, I just wouldn't even listen to. Like, I'm just not here for it. And that's jokes against, trans and the LGBTQ. Not particularly black jokes, and I know that sounds a bit wild, but like things against like abortion and rape, things like that. I can't. Like, I just cannot. But that's my limit, and then everybody has their own limits. And so for me, like, I could be saying what's my limit, but somebody else could say that limit, and by the time we all say our limits, it's like there's almost not that form of art is now gone. So the question is like, do we want that art? Do we not? Like that's the line I'm sitting on. It's tough. Sorry, it's just tough.
I'm kind of tired of people saying that like this new generation has such an issue with everything. We always complain about everything. Like, I'm really tired of that narrative because I think the difference is there have always these things that people are talking about now have always been an issue. They have always been oppressive to people, but not everyone has had the personal power or the platform to talk about it. And that's the difference. So that's why when I say, yes, I believe in freedom of speech, but I also recognize the fact that people actually just want to speak without there being repercussions. And that's the main issue, because especially with people who are, like I said, these legends who are middle-aged now, they're like, but I was making trans jokes. I was making these kind of jokes to these communities and no one was saying anything. So why can't I still do that now? It's not like it's all of a sudden been a problem. It has always been a problem, but there have been certain voices that have not been heard until today. And that's why it feels like everything is an issue, because everyone's talking about everything. But I don't see that as anything apart from good, because if you go on the internet, yeah, you're going to find some extremists on like either end of the spectrum. But at the end of the day, there's so many conversations that were happening now that weren't happening 10, 20 years ago. And that's the difference. It doesn't mean that people are complaining. It means that people are being open and honest. Do you think that people have already all of a sudden started to be offended by new things, or do you think that people have actually just started to be vocal about the things that make them offended? Because before, people just had to sit there and take it, and now we can talk about it, and I don't think that's a bad thing, like, at all.
Do you think you're in the majority or the minority of people who want to speak out about comedy or things that are happening in films, or do you think you're in the majority or minority?
Well, I'm an opinionated person, so...
I was going to say she's in the majority. No offense to that.
Because I think that for as much as you can find people who are willing to speak out about Bridgerton, and the amount of people that are willing to speak out about comedy, you're going to find people who are from those groups who are also like, I don't really take it as a big deal. And I think that for me is where the argument falls down a little bit. Because I don't think it's, well, now that we know that it's wrong, we all just want to speak up about it. Because I know lots of Black people who loved Bridgerton and they were like, didn't see a problem, didn't have an issue, didn't think there was anything need to speak out. Like we're saying, there's still going to be people who are going to go and see Ricky Gervais. There's still, who might be from marginalized groups. Like in Dave Chappelle's comedy, when he's talking about his trans jokes, bear with me here, he's talking about a trans person again who came to see his show, and he said that person was sitting down and laughing their heads off and they found it funny and this, that and the other. Now, I don't know if we can take one trans person laughing at it, but I'm saying I don't think that we should take it as, well, people are just speaking up because they want to and, you know, this is the best thing. Because I'm like, well, not everybody's offended by it, but the people who are speaking out about it are probably speaking the loudest about it. And when it comes to cancelling people now, that's where I have an issue. I have no issue whatsoever about people facing the consequences of what they've said or done. That's not it. It's when they're kind of like, there's people who are like, burn all of the books that Harry Potter woman wrote because of what she said, and burn this and cut that person off Twitter. And for me, I'm like, where does it end? Because we're getting to the point someone has one strike and they're out. That's what I have an issue with and where it's going.
That just feels like now we're getting onto cancel culture and things like that. And I don't really feel like you understood my point, because it's not that people who are speaking out about things are speaking out about things for everyone. It's like individualism. So if I'm talking about something that's important to me, it's important to me because it's important to me. And that's why I said when we were talking about the honours list, it's like, yeah, I'm going to respect Benjamin Zephaniah for not only giving it back, but being vocal about why he's giving it back. But I also don't have any judgment for Lewis Hamilton, who wants to accept it. So it's like, I don't understand what the issue is with people voicing their opinions, if all that it is people voicing their opinions. Like, I guess the issue is, for me, if I could probably make it a little bit clearer, is that as much as it might be an individual, one person, like a small handful of people's voices can get a show cancelled in this day and age. Do you know what I mean? A small group of people saying something can get someone fired from a job. So it's not just the person who speaks out has no effect, because we are now seeing it doesn't have to have much of an, it doesn't need to have thousands and hundreds of thousands of people saying something. It can be a handful and suddenly someone is pushed to the side and we never see them again. So that's where the link is. Cancel culture doesn't actually really exist to the capacity that people think that it does, because I'm never here for cancelling people ever. Like, I'm always here for just like, because I just think humans grow. So I'm always just here for having important conversations, which is why I said that people starting these conversations is a very good thing. I'm never going to see it as anything else. But it's like, well, never say never. But it's like, people want to be on the internet and be mad at one person, but it's like that person then continues, especially if that person is, you know, more privileged than the people who are speaking out against them. Most of the time, they just fail upwards, and there isn't really that many bad things that happen to them. They might have a couple of days where they have to log off the internet, but they don't really have everything stripped away from them as in this dramatic sense as like we make it seem to be. I think most of the time what really happens is people raise an issue that needs to be talked about. Like Halle Berry, when she almost took that role, people were like, okay, we'd prefer it if you didn't because A, B, and C. And then so she's like, I'm going to take the weekend, I'm going to read about it, and then I'm going to think, and then I'll come back here to continue this conversation. And that's all that it should be. But obviously it doesn't always end up like that. But it's like, we're never going to get to the good versions of the end result if we don't try to speak out against things that are important, period.
Should I jump in? I can jump in because I had a thought, if that's okay. Because the beginning of this exchange of words, I did have a thought because I kind of understood what Sophie said and I understood what you were saying, Miranda. But I think it's the idea that if, like, when a lot of people speak out or when anybody speaks out and says anything, I think nowadays, and I don't know if it's because of COVID or anything, but now for me, sometimes like the internet hasn't been like this happy, lappy place of where I can go and catch a giggle and escapism. I feel like every time I log on to Twitter, I'm seeing a group of people complaining about something. And so it does feel like our generation, sometimes always has like a bone to pick. But then I also understand that the previous generations didn't even have the privilege to even say, that was a bit foul what you did, X, Y, Z. So I understand that these aren't new issues. They're the same issues that we're talking about. But I do understand how sometimes if you're on the internet, depending on what your feed is like, it can almost feel overwhelming, like all we're always doing is just being upset about something and complaining about something. So I kind of saw the middle ground in that. I don't know what your feed. Yeah, because I don't know what your feed looks like or anything. But you know, like last year. Yeah, that's what. Because remember last year.
I feel like they came for Letitia Wright too hard, and I was like, guys, I thought she made a joke.
Exactly. Because last year a few times, and I think I said it on the show. Like I kept taking breaks from social media because I couldn't. At least my feed, and these weren't people that were usually giving such heavy topics, but everything was like heavy and upset, and COVID is already like its own mental battle in itself. I just couldn't keep feeding into that, so I kept having to take breaks. And so it felt like for me personally at one point that everything was a problem. We could never just have one day of happiness. But there was also understanding, but the reason why I felt like that was because when they were saying what was wrong, I completely felt those issues to the core. I felt it so strongly, it charged me. And that was all because these were the same issues that we kept talking about. So yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we're just getting ourselves confused between like internet trolls and people who are actually complaining about nothing, because I've seen them, and people who are trying to raise important conversations. And a lot of the time people get muddled up together because it's like, oh, you're talking loudly, and we want to be happy, so let's not do that. But at the same time, there's a lot of issues that are like important to raise. And then on the flip side, there are trolls. I've seen them, I've met them, they've been in my DMs, they've been in my comments. You know what I mean? I'm not here for them either. So it's like there should definitely be a balance, but at the same time, like what you said, Anissa, you're like, I don't know what your timeline looks like when it's if we have an issue with these things, and just scroll past or look away or unfollow. We can actually accumulate to the best of our ability what we want to see. And, you know, we've made a lot of references to the internet, but I'm actually just talking about speaking out in general. But, you know, we could keep going. I'm going to stop talking so we can keep going.
Yeah, and well, just to kind of wrap up what you said, Luanda, like it's all about having balance. And I think when you see something that offends you or is not for you, you just have to disengage. It's just the unfortunate thing, but that's just what you have to do. Anyway, thank you.
Same with comedy.
Yes, exactly. Just disengage if you can, or go on Twitter and raise hell. Balance. So find yourself somewhere in the middle.
What you did on Monday, don't do on Tuesday. Balance.
So thank you so much for watching and listening to another episode of Ethnically Speaking. And let's keep the conversation going. Do you think comedy should be politically correct? Let us know in the comments below. And for even more of us, be sure to click the link in the description for access to Extra Ethnic, a special segment available exclusively to our email subscribers. And for a summary of everything we've spoken about today, make sure you head over to unitedmelaningroup.com/ES 030. There's a link in the description below for that as well. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. We'll be here at the same time, same place next week. So make sure you wash your hands, you wear your mask, and you stay safe.